In the last federal election, there was one central theme: vote for the Liberals and Mark Carney because they are the only ones that can get a deal with Donald Trump in the United States on trade. Well, today, we are now, as a country, going to be hit with 35% tariffs. And why? Because Mark Carney could not get a deal done. Hello, I'm Adrienne. With me are Lorrie Goldstein and Brian Lilley. Well, here we go again, Brian. We are now talking about the fact that Carney could not get a deal done with the United States. And putting that into context, India, China, the EU, the UK, Mexico is 90 days away from getting a deal. Countries all over the world seem to be able to work and negotiate with the United States. But why has Canada failed in this regard?
We were very close to a deal at the beginning of June. Remember, I was reporting on it, led the reporting on it. Other media outlets followed and confirmed what I had. And PMO was talking about, yes, a deal is imminent. That's what they were leaking to the media. And then things fell apart. Is it because of Elon Musk and Donald Trump breaking up? Happened around the same time. Maybe it had an impact. Not sure. But they never recovered from being so close to a deal. It was very high level. Now, what have I been told? I think I've mentioned this to you before. Ambassador Kristen Hillman was put in charge of the negotiations. To me, that's like putting the accounting team in charge of trying to sell the car on the car lot. She is a bureaucrat, a wonk, very smart, very accomplished, but not a salesperson. You needed someone who could sell Donald Trump and his team on a deal with Canada. We didn't do that. We're also trying to negotiate a full and comprehensive trade agreement when the Americans just want a 50,000 foot version. That's what they got with the other countries. And so for all those Canadians sitting there saying, well, but you can't negotiate with Donald Trump. He's a toddler. He throws tantrums. No one can get a deal with this guy. Well, no, everyone else got a deal
That's
with
right.
this guy. We're just refusing to do it. And then at the last minute, we decide that, yeah, let's irritate Trump, who is desperately trying to get a ceasefire, by telling Hamas, yeah, don't worry about negotiating. We're going to recognize a Palestinian state unilaterally come September at the United Nations. It was handled poorly, beginning to end. We should have secured this deal in June. Instead, we've let it flounder, and we've irritated the Americans all the way along.
You know, Lori, it is very easy to just simply say, well, the Americans continue to move the goalposts. How do you negotiate with somebody that wakes up at midnight and starts posting on X or True Social his feelings and changes his mind every time? But many countries around the world, big countries with bigger economies than we have certainly been able to secure deals, at least working deals. Canada has not. So politically speaking, I suppose for Carney to run around and say, you know, big evil Donald Trump can't work with them, but this is impacting very real jobs here, the real economy that Canadians are dealing with, unemployment. This is not beyond just Carney's political fortunes.
Well, you know, Mark Carney was elected because he said he could do a deal. He was the best person to do a deal. We don't have a deal. Mexico yesterday got a 90-day reprieve on any new tariffs. What's the reason for that? There were two countries in the world that retaliated against Trump: China and Canada. Other countries that didn't retaliate are getting agreements. Now, what was the effect of Canada retaliating by putting in counter tariffs? It was that Canadians are now paying more for imported goods from the United States. How does that help anyone in Canada, where the real issues that haven't gone away, even though we're in this tariff bubble, are the cost of living, cost of housing? So I question the wisdom of the retaliation. But politically, it's obvious what's going on here. I was amused when in the last week or so, suddenly the increase of non-compliant goods that weren't compliant with the Canada-Mexico-U.S. agreement that was signed in 2020 under Trump so it's only the non-compliant goods. So, it's a very small percentage, and it's not really that big a deal. Well, have we forgotten about the 50% tariff on aluminum and the 50% tariff on steel? I mean, part of this negotiation is to get agreement on those things. I think, and I have no inside knowledge, that Carney and his advisors have decided that it's politically astute to not make a deal at this point, to allow allow the Canadians to believe this is all Trump. He's nuts. There's nothing we can do. I think it's a deliberate policy now. And the problem is that, look, we haven't had the disaster that we thought we were going to have back in April. And that's because of delays and of all these things. But this what's going on right now is corrosive, especially in two provinces, in Ontario, in southern Ontario, Windsor, the Toronto rate, and Quebec. Well, why? Because Ontario is a big producer of steel, and Quebec is a big producer of aluminum. So what I find shocking is this idea. Oh well, it's only 10% more than the 25%. CUSMA covers already most of the goods. But what about the sectoral tariffs that are going on? I just I'm not confident that our government is doing the best things in the economic interests of Canadians as opposed to the political interests of the government.
Well, and that's really one of the biggest challenges here, Brian, is looking at their own singular electoral fortunes. The Liberals are, which should come as no surprise to anybody, as opposed to looking at what's happening in this country more broadly. I know that there have been meetings with premiers, and Doug Ford in Ontario is Mark Carney's biggest champion, and I'm sure Doug Ford's going to be all over American media, crapping all over Donald Trump and saying how he can't negotiate with him. But though there's not a lot of pushback on those types of interviews because there's not a discussion about, well, what's happening within our own borders. Canada's problem started way before Donald Trump became president 6 months ago. So there's not that part of the discussion happening. It's far easier, as Lorrie points out, to blame the United States, blame Trump on this. From your reporting and covering this from stem to stern, do you see anything changing? 'Cause Trump said last night, we don't like the way our farmers are being treated. I mean, so there is a lot being thrown out there. Then Canada's recognition of Palestine, which is insane, but they threw that monkey in the ring. Like, what is Canada thinking?
Well, on the issue of dairy, which Trump continues to bring up, there is this: we will not surrender anything within our dairy sector to the big bad Americans. And so there is this narrative of the Carney government or Doug Ford or whichever leader is standing up to the United States, and he's trying to take away our supply management system. I have been saying for months that is not what the Americans want. What they want is for Canada to respect the letter and the spirit of the agreement that we signed in 2020 that they immediately had to take us to a trade dispute over. Because why? We said you can have 3.5% of the Canadian market open to your exports. By the way, we export too, and we want access in other countries. We just don't want to give access to our own. So we said, yes, we can increase it to 3.5%, but we will hold the quota and give it out to Canadian companies. Of course, those Canadian companies not importing American goods. And so the Americans have been fighting us on that. They just want us to live up to what they felt they negotiated back then. Now, I've been saying that for months. People are saying, no, he wants to dismantle supply management. Great reporting by Mike Crawley I'm going to shock you here, at CBC. Crawley, who's normally here at Queen's Park, was down in Washington for the past while, spoke to all the Americans. No, they're like, leave your supply management as it is. Just don't treat us badly. And that's what we consistently do on dairy. But, this narrative that we're going to stand up to the Americans and we'll punish them with our, counter tariffs is a false one. You can go back and look at what happened in 2017 and 2018 with the tariffs on steel and aluminum. And people will still tell you, whether it's Justin Trudeau or Doug Ford, that us putting tariffs on bourbon and playing cards is what got the Americans to heel. Nope. As I reported at the time, as I've reported since, you look at the actual joint declaration. Why did Canada get those tariffs lifted? Nothing to do with bourbon or playing cards. It's that we agreed to stop letting China ship steel through Canada and call it Canadian. We actually dealt with the issue and the irritant on the table. What the Carney guys seem to be doing is not going for a deal for political reasons and then allowing these false narratives to play out. It looks good to thump your chest and say that you are looking out for Canada, but what about the people whose unemployment is on the line or who are already unemployed? It's up to 12.4%, I believe, in Windsor. We're about 9% in Toronto, 8% in Hamilton. Those numbers are going to go up. Up in Algoma, do you think Algoma Steel is going to stick around unless the government keeps bailing them out with these kind of tariffs? We need a deal. We need to be realistic and not petulant children who think that it's always better to fight with the Americans than work with them. But that attitude plays for a lot of Canadians, especially in the laptop class or retirees who don't have to worry about making sure that they've got a job next week.
Lorrie, last word to you. We haven't really seen or heard much from Prime Minister Carney. I don't know where he is, but ironically, when the way Canadians find out that there are trade irritants that are happening between our two countries is when President Trump puts something on X. For example, when he said that the digital services tax was a no-go zone to getting a deal done, Canadians didn't hear about that from our own government. We heard about it from President Trump. He's the one that, love him or hate him, he's the one that's being far more transparent about what's going on in these negotiations than we're actually hearing from our own government. But I'm wondering, we can criticize Carney as much as is fair, and I think in this instance it certainly is, because it has been a failure to get a deal done. But it's not over, right? There still can be something done within the next 2-3 months, 6 months, whatever, before we actually start renegotiating the USMCA in 2026, correct?
Oh, yeah, look, and obviously Canada's position is to try as give as little as possible now, because any concession you make now, you can't hold until the negotiations next year about the entire Mexico, Canada, U.S. CUSMA, as we call it, agreement, and that's going to be huge. But you remarked on something just a while back that I think deserves emphasis. When Carney was running for the leadership, he said that under 10 years of Justin Trudeau government, his predecessor, he specifically said in one of the leadership debates, look, we weren't in good shape before Trump. And he gave two reasons. One was immigration, that at which even the Trudeau government eventually said, yeah, we got that out of control. And what happens when you have more immigrants? And so then now there's more people sharing the pie. The pie gets less for everyone and prices go up because of demand. Where are you going to house all these people? Where are we going to put them? And the other one was, he said, that the operational spending of the Trudeau government had gone up, I think it was an average of 9% a year. Those things aren't going away. We don't have a budget. We're supposed to have a budget in the fall. There have been speculations by think tanks that the deficit, given our commitments on the military that we've made, in fairness, to satisfy Trump, that the deficit's going to explode. And the deficits that Carney proposed in his campaign platform, absent the cost of these further promises, were way above what the Trudeau government was predicting. So my concern here, again, is the tariff debate's taking up all the oxygen. But the long-term solution, which Carney himself says is the solution, is to diversify our markets beyond the United States, right? That's what we're supposed to be doing. But we're, in other words, to me, we're just as weak as we were when Carney was saying we have to get away from a decade of what the Trudeau government did. Because right now, I don't see anything different.
Can I just add one quick point, Adrienne, off of what Lorrie was saying there about diversifying our trade? Big trade irritant with the Americans, like we were just talking about, is supply management. We should have a trade deal with Britain. We had one when they were part of the European Union. They're not part of it. Apparently, we couldn't just copy and paste the deal and leave it as it was. That wasn't good enough. Do you know why? Because our dairy farmers went in and said, no, we will not continue to allow British cheese to be imported. We don't have a trade deal with the UK because our dairy farmers said no. And that has been an irritant in every trade deal. So, Stephen Harper signed a bunch of them, but they're not really being well implemented. And a big part of it is we are sometimes our own worst enemies. And it seems that government after government is going to allow the entire economy to suffer to keep a few thousand dairy farmers in Quebec happy.
Well, the Carney Liberals have failed to get a trade deal with the United States, and those 35% tariffs are coming. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and go to the torontosun.com. You'll find commentary and coverage there you will not find anywhere else.